Can you hear me? You're on mute, eh?
I can.
Okay. All right, so we just need to wait a little bit. There are some participants that are joining. Hello, Gail and Pam, Fiona, Antoinette, Tess, Jill. Welcome. We're just waiting for a few more to join us and then we can get kicked off. Adeshola, welcome. Antoinette. Yeah, so just waiting for a few more people to join us, and then Hugh and I are going to do a quick intro. I think a lot of you know who we are, so that could be really short. All right, we've got some attendees. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So welcome everybody to a webinar which talks about the comeback trail of incentive travel. With me today, I've got Hugh Tuckett, a dear friend, an ex-colleague, and now a partner in our business through the Euromic network. Hugh has touched almost every aspect of the incentive travel supply chain. And Hugh, give us a little bit of an intro of yourself. You certainly have risen to global fame now in your executive director role with Euromic. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thanks, Dave. I don't know whether it's fame or infamy, one of the two, but yeah. Started off my career in travel, in airlines and cruise ships, and then cut my teeth on incentive travel really as a DMC with Abercrombie and Kent many years ago as the inbound incentives manager into South Africa. Joined the dark side, spent 15 years with you and Arwin, going up the ranks there and growing the business with you, Dave, which was interesting, both in South Africa and internationally. Moved back to the UK a number of years ago, what is it, 6 years ago now, and came back onto the DMC supply chain. So I'm now running Euromic, which is an association of 47 MICE DMCs around the world. So that's pretty much who I am.
Yeah, fantastic, man. So thank you so much for partnering with me in this. So just to give the audience a little bit of background, it's not just going to be us talking about our gut feel on the industry. We are going to reference two very interesting and current site insight surveys that have surveyed the corporate market, predominantly in the US, but certainly also participants from the UK and two South African clients as well. So there is some relevance in the sample survey. These are all corporate planners that make decisions on where they put incentive business and when it comes back, and align their buying to travel policies and procedures. And of course, as we know, that whole thing has been radically disrupted in our industry over the past year and a half, almost 2 years now. So
Dave, before we start, maybe you should, just for those that don't know, maybe introduce SITE, seeing as you were the past global president of SITE for some time. Maybe just what SITE is and where this research comes from.
Sure. Thanks for that prompt, and welcome to some of the corporate guys on the call. I can see in the attendee list, hello Luit, and there are a couple, Gugu and Antonella, thank you for joining and making the time to be on this. But SITE really is the Society for Incentive Travel Excellence. It's a worldwide body of an association that really is the incentive voice and home of incentive professionals worldwide. I think it represents members from about 90 different countries. It has members across the spectrum from corporate planners, incentive agencies, DMCs, and the supply chain, including hoteliers, airlines, and other venues and activities that make up our economy as an industry. So in South Africa, its SITE chapter is headed by Tess Prus, who is also on this call. Thank you, Tess, for joining us. She has been the chair lady of the SITE chapter, and that has grown from being just a South African chapter to an African chapter. And she's done a lot of work in traversing the African continent to get members from different countries around Africa so that we speak as an African collective for our lobbying and promoting the African continent as an amazing destination. But also SITE has a role in educating young people and the supply chain into the ways of the incentive industry and the various different disciplines within it. It is, I always consider, to be the very pinnacle of the business travel ecosystem. And yeah, if you're not a member of SITE and you want to join, I have a fantastic website, and we can send you Tessa's details as well. I'm sure she'd love to have you on board as a member going forward. Yeah, so that's a little bit about it, about SITE. Hugh, you've just got back from IMEX Las Vegas. It's kind of like a restart key milestone event that's happened. Tell us a little bit about IMEX Vegas and what happened there. What was the tone that came out of that international?
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, please forgive me, I've got a bit of a cold. I picked up a cold. Don't worry, it's not COVID. But it's interesting, very difficult to arrange. As you know, the US only opened up on the 8th of November, which was the day before the show was due to start. So that had a big impact on the show in terms of European buyers and people that were able to actually attend the show. But it was being billed as the Great Unmute, as they called it, the reconnection and the start of the industry again. And yes, it was exactly that. Ray Bloom and Karina Bauer from IMEX had been steadfast in their approach to this show, and really, despite all the hurdles and difficulties around and uncertainty around travel arrangements and making the show happen, they would just, kept on plodding ahead and saying, we're going to have a show no matter what happens. About 3,000 hosted buyers eventually turned up at the show, and it was amazing. The buzz was incredible. It definitely signaled a big start of the industry in the US. The US, for the first time, there was a big contingent of US buyers there, which you don't always get at IMEX America. But I would say very, very successful, a wonderful feeling, great buzz on the floor. I think the overriding thought is just how desperate people were to get back to normal and just to make things happen again, and how excited they were to be having really good and fruitful conversations, and very optimistic. The whole thing was optimistic. And very well run and very well managed and put together as well. It's quite interesting. The US, for the most part, seems to, as you walk through airports and things, is almost as if COVID doesn't exist anymore in the greater US. As you walk through Las Vegas, casinos are open, people not really wearing masks anywhere. So quite interesting to see that dynamic when other countries have been so strict on that. But yeah, the show, everybody was vaccinated, very strong testing regime to get into the show, and just proved that you can have large events very effectively. And you know, it went ahead. It was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic to experience, even if it was just through the voyeurism of social media, seeing all the mates getting together, all the partnerships being re-celebrated and connected, and the fact that, you know, business tourism is back, and it signaled the start of it. I was one of those buyers that chickened out with that 8th opening on the 8th, because I know it takes me usually a day at least to recover from the jet lag before I can have a meaningful conversation in the US. So to land on the morning of the 8th, it just wasn't going to be productive for me. But I'm so glad that it did go ahead, and people really made the big effort to get there, and hopefully some good business was done. I saw the South African stand was buzzing. They had a number of really key DMCs on that stand. Did you have a chance to have a little turn by the South African stand?
Yeah, I walked around the show. The show was big. About from an exhibitor perspective, only about 30% smaller than traditional pre-COVID. So, however, that's from an attendee point of view, exhibitor attendee point of view. What was interesting, that from a floor space perspective, it was the same, because effectively there was bigger space on the stands, and of course it was in the new destination, which was in the Mandalay Bay as well. But busy. The US domestic market is huge, and a lot of corporate planners, a lot of corporate buyers, agency planners, the larger agencies such as Maritz, BI Worldwide, Amir, 110, Creative, all the big, you know, sort of incentive houses from the US, all very present, very prominent, and very keen to do business. Almost one of the overriding thoughts I got was they wanted to see who had survived, who's still around. It's been a long 2 years. And wanted to see who was on the block and who's there, and what the state of play is. You know, I don't need to tell you how destructive the last 2 years has been in our industry, and so there was a curious element of people coming to see who's still standing, as it were.
Yeah, and I think that then leads us and segues us into the next section of this conversation. I think a lot of people in South Africa want to know, when is it coming back? When can we expect business to start tooling up again? And, you know, nobody really has that crystal ball, but I think research is telling us, your experience on the show floor and what we're seeing locally from local corporates is certainly indicating to me at a very sort of high level that there's work to be done and that business will come back. It's a question of when, timing, being able to survive this last segment of this incredible desert that businesses have gone through. And I think, you know, certainly in the South African context, a lot of inbound agencies that have relied heavily on inbound incentives have probably suffered the worst, and had to pivot and scramble to do other things to survive and dig deep into the reserves in order to still keep their businesses alive. So without further ado, let me talk about the Site's Insight webinar. In the heat of the pandemic, we lobbied together with others that Site needed to get close to the corporate buyer. So not just the travel buyer, but the companies that make the decisions to execute or not on incentive travel. So your ground zero delta decision maker, and understand what was going on in their world and what their predictability factors were, what had shifted in their minds in terms of procurement, and what had shifted in their minds in terms of the core elements of an incentive program. So the site ran two polls of a number of question banks. Some were closed-ended and some were open-ended questions. And Hugh will talk to the demographics just now. But before we do that, the first survey was done in and the second one was done in September this year. So very, very relevant research studies coming out that we will send everybody a link to afterwards that you can go and read. This kind of data is actually critical, and it's so easy in the noise of everything to miss a key report like that. And that's why Hugh and I collaborated and thought this is well worth revisiting, because we don't think everybody's seen it, the kind of data. And unfortunately, it does have a bit of a US squint to it, because the majority of the participants came from that. I'm just going to try and get to my screen share, Hugh, and then you can talk to the demographics there. 1 second. Okay. Sorry for the fingers across the screen, but I've got one of these crazy computers where the camera is at the bottom of the screen. Don't know who. Here we go. So Hugh, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, David, it's got a bit of a US slant on it. The finance and insurance industry in the US is by far the largest incentive travel drivers. You know, the insurance industry are so big. You talk about the American insurance groups, AIG. You talk about the massive big sort of financial services institutions, the banks and so on. And they've always traditionally used incentive travel as a key motivator in their sort of HR basket. Your direct selling is also very, very huge. So that we're talking about the Tupperwares, the Amways, the Forever Living products, a massive, massive part of the US industry. Incentive travel is big for them. You're talking about Amway taking over the whole of a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, one of their mega liners. They do big business in incentive travel. And then obviously your technology drivers. Still, the US being such a technology hub, so your Googles of this world, Yahoo, all your technological Microsoft, all those big companies that are doing stuff, so are all using incentive travel as drivers. And I think that's quite good to see that, the traditional markets are still there. And I think you can even see it in the South African, we're seeing it within even Euromic, the first recovery, and the people that are getting back into the space are actually the financial services recovery. We know that there's a large medical health insurance company in South Africa. I won't mention the name, but they're off to the Maldives next month and traveling soon already. We know that, Dave, you've just been doing some work for the financial services industry in South Africa as well, another big player there. So, and don't forget, a lot of those companies did exceptionally well during the crisis. That's, those finance and insurance companies, a lot of them did very, very well. So they're still buoyant.
Yeah. Okay, so from that demographic, the reason why we shared that with you is just to give you an insight into where did these numbers come from, where did the results of these surveys come from, and it's quite a nice broad spectrum of corporate users of incentives. So I'm going to dive into the next slide, which talks about how the corporate C-suite leadership views and supports the use of incentive travel specifically, and how positive or not were they. So this bar graph at the top line, that over 50% of those companies surveyed, their C-suite executives were 100% supportive of continuing to do incentive travel. A further 30% of them were supportive but concerned about safety issues. So if you take those top two lines, overwhelmingly 80% of C-suite executives in those firms polled were totally supportive of the ongoing use of incentive travel as a powerful business tool within their business units. And I think that's a fantastic fact that's come out of this survey. The others, supportive but concerned about costs, and obviously that's a factor of some of those businesses being negatively impacted by COVID on an economic and profitability basis. So obviously costs are concerned there. And then the rest really were supportive, but obviously each trip or each incentive needs to be justified on its merits. And that goes to the whole question of incentive travel needs to have a return on objective or return on investment or some kind of return. And depending on the type of trip and the destination, C-suite executives saying, yes, we will support it, but let's look at each particular piece in its unique circumstances. And I don't think, to be honest, that that's changed from even pre-COVID times. I think everybody at the C-suite level is looking at, okay, let's look at this from a perspective of each trip must justify its own merits. And I think that's become a bigger and bigger trend in the industry. So that's very, very encouraging. And those numbers have stayed pretty constant between the first survey and the second survey. All right, so Hugh's now going to talk to this next slide, which really talks about the key things that are important when considering doing a trip, an incentive travel the deliverables behind it. So Hugh, you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, Dave, I think what's interesting about this slide is that it underlines that the fundamentals haven't changed, even to your previous slide as well. A lot of people are saying what's changed, what's different going forward. But the fact of the matter is that not a lot has changed. The fundamentals are still there. The biggest criteria in this questionnaire is for destination selection is appeal. So what are you selling? So if destinations were appealing before, they're still appealing. You know, does it have that appeal? The only thing that potentially might damage that is COVID policy, COVID vaccination, and potentially how well those destinations have handled or are perceived. So for example, a destination like India might not be as appealing as it was previously, unfortunately, just purely from the way that it has been portrayed in the COVID crisis. The other thing you can see is that safety has increased. Obviously, there's a duty of care on any corporate client taking its top performers overseas, and you know, safety is paramount. They have to keep that at the top. COVID safety and safety. Safety was always an issue. COVID safety has come up there as well. I think what's interesting is the cost one that has come down 3.6. So what you're seeing there, had you done this survey pre-COVID, it was all about cost. It was all about return on investment. It was everybody with procurement departments going through travel programs, looking at everything under a microscope and looking at that return on investment. Interesting that that's not really that much of a criteria these days. More importantly is, can the destination do the job? Is it appealing? Can it help a corporate company or a corporate organization achieve its incentive goals? Are you able to access it? Number one, can we get in? Are we able to fly there without too much? What's the infrastructure like? And that infrastructure relates to around the safety. How safe is it? And is it appealing? With all of those things, is it still a destination that people want to change to? And if the fundamentals are there, the fundamentals are there.
Yeah, very interesting. So just for the audience's sake, this is the second survey. Earlier in the year, in the earlier survey, safety outranked destination appeal, right, as the number one factor. Then we had the Delta. I think the timing of that was when the Delta variant had come on the scene, and there was again this additional, so there was green shoots of activity pre-Delta, then there was Delta hit it, and then we got over the Delta the sort of wave, and of course vaccination rollouts became more and more the norm everywhere. So the difference, if you look at the two surveys, the destination appeal came back a little bit. Safety was the number one criteria. And then once we had got over that Delta thing and more vaccine rollout, destination appeal nudged itself forward. Safety still being a massive factor in that and the COVID safety protocols as well. So as you say, the fundamentals have not shifted. There's a little bit of nuance, but certainly from a destination marketing point of view, these are very, very interesting points to go back and brainstorm with your management teams. How are you going to speak to potential US, UK, German buyers about the South African destination or any destination, and how are you going to address the needs of that corporate buyer with all of those points? Because that fundamentally has to be a change in the way you present a destination and how you help agencies like you and I put that proposal to a corporate end user, so that we have to be aware of these things. And I think that's one of the very, very interesting parts, because surveys for the sake of surveys mean nothing. It's what do you do with the data points? So I would encourage everybody to take this sort of data back to your teams, brainstorm and think about it. How do you alter certain things? How do you alter the way you're pitching a destination? Not only at pitch time, but what are you telling people about your destination, your product in the social media space, and so on. Hugh, back to you.
You want to go to the next slide, Dave? Sorry. Yeah, this is, again, I think this is testament, Dave, to what I was saying earlier on. This was increases or decreases according to the type of incentive. And the overriding theme there is it's the same in terms of the feeling around increases. So your classic meeting, incentive meeting, very much the same, 50% of where it was before. What's interesting is the virtual and the hybrid. So we're seeing they're not, it says NA on the slide here and versus a decrease. I wrote an article about a year ago as to why COVID-19 could be the best thing ever to happen to incentive travel. And I think this is exactly it. I think for many years, there was a lot of talk about virtual meetings and do we have to travel to the other side of the world to achieve those business goals and things that we wanted to do. Why can't we do this remotely? Why do we have to get everybody in the same room together? And I think this slide just talks to that. The reason is because hybrid and virtual just doesn't cut the mustard. If you want to inspire people and if you want to motivate them and if you want to get them excited and bought into your process, yes, virtual and hybrid have a place to go, but it's only getting together in the room that's going to get that. All of the virtual and hybrid, it will be there. It will be a future part. And for incentive planners and DMCs even, it's going to be interesting to see how you incorporate that hybrid model into your incentive programs, because it's not going away. There will always be a portion of people that cannot travel, will not travel, don't want to travel. How are they going to be incorporated into the program? How are you going to do this? So there will be a big, virtual and hybrid are going to form a part of every meeting now. It's just the way that it's going to be. But it's from your classic incentive. It's going to stay the same. It's the way to go.
I'm sure a lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief to hear that, and you're right. Virtual doesn't cut the mustard. Getting people together, we've said it for years. It's where magic happens, when people come together, and having delivered some very successful local incentives recently, to see the smiles and the hugs and it's so good to see you again. And it's not over a virtual screen. Virtual has many, many benefits, such as this, for educational purposes and all sorts of things, but nothing beats seeing an old colleague that you haven't seen for a while, to connect, to have a beer together and just to shoot the breeze. Nothing is as inspirational as that. And one of the things that I learned, having been in this industry for so long, where you kind of almost get jaded, is that having gone through the lockdown and that experience, I saw our industry with new eyes again. And it was an absolute privilege to have that perspective again. And I don't think I'll ever take getting on a plane or going to a stunning destination for granted again. But anyway, getting to nostalgic here, let's press on. Okay, what is this slide about? Measures the adoption by COVID risks. So let's talk about that. I mean, vaccination rollout has been quite strong in South Africa and other parts of the world. We've now got a digital sort of vaccine passport. And events and certain nations are saying you can only come in once there's proof of vaccination. But it's not the only policy around COVID safety. Hugh, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I would, because this is, I think, is a very interesting conversation, and it was quite prominent at IMEX. So what you have is a corporate client that is offering travel as a reward. However, the proviso of you to enjoy that reward is that you need to be vaccinated. Now, as we know, there are a lot of people in the world that don't want to get vaccinated for whatever reasons. So therefore, are you now alienating a portion of your participants, incentive participant audience, because you are putting a proviso of being needed to be vaccinated in order to qualify for a prize? And are you alienating certain people to that effect? Could you turn those motivational buttons off instead of on because you're forcing me to be vaccinated? And that's a real danger for us a lot, especially when you look in the US, for example, where there is still quite a large portion of the population that are unwilling to be vaccinated. So it's an interesting one. And I asked that of a couple of corporate buyers, and to be honest, everybody has just dumped it completely on the destination, saying, okay, well, it's not us, it's the destination that's requiring it. It's the airline. I understand that you might not want to get tested. So that's why the host destination is featuring so prominently in this slide, because, that onus is being shifted completely on the destination. The proof of vaccination is obviously huge, a lot, and it's the way to go. What's very interesting is that testing is the other way to do this. So for domestic and for local events that are not getting an airline or going to a far-flung destination, it all boils down to testing. So the other thing that we're going to have to get used to is on-site testing, with COVID. So you can come to our event, we'd love you to have you there, but you need to, if you haven't got a proof of vaccination, or if you haven't got a negative PCR test, then you're going to have one on site in order for you to come in and play into the event. So it's an interesting process. And from what I'm seeing globally and from around the world, it's either going to be testing, but vaccine passports are the way to go, which is going to alienate a small portion of your incentive audience. because but I think most corporates are willing to take the risk on that, following the science.
Yeah. I think we've got one more slide to go. This really talks about some of the timing. So, 2020, about 70% replaced their travel with another award. 31% replaced one with another award. 8% temporarily pivoted. And then we've got committed to travel and planning for 2022. So 80% shifted their plans collectively to, if they were going to travel in 2020, said they were going to shift to 2022. Now, I think we all know that not many of those actually materialized, and unfortunately, we're in 2021. So there's a big commitment to the 2022 planning and executed travel happening, and only 24% committed to travel and other forms of reward. So this is a slide, it's got a lot of detail around it, and you can read into that a little bit further. But, really, from a South African point of view, having had discussions with some DMCs, the likes of Walters and Dragonfly, that, I think there's a prediction that some early adopters will come through in 2022. And maybe those guys would have had some kind of a refund or a credit held on their behalf to entice them to come back in 2022. But it will be a small trickle as opposed to open the floodgates, but that it would look like that in 2023, you'd get a normalization of the kind of volumes that we were experiencing pre-COVID, and hopefully then the ability then to start growing from that point forward, all other factors in South Africa being equal. Hugh, do you want to make any comments on that before we go to the last slide?
I would, Dave, just in terms of, this talks about timing and when we can expect business to return. Business is back. Business is happening already. Things are happening. I think what we were expecting was like sort of a big opening of the floodgates and everything was going to go back to normal. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we're seeing is just a gradual increase and things are just getting back slowly. It's not that massive, sort of we're back moment. But what this is interesting, and this is going to create, I think, potentially a challenge in 2022 and in 2023, is that we have corporate clients that are used to flexibility and that have been demanding flexibility in terms of COVID cancellations, putting a program together and saying, okay, but we want to be able to cancel 2 weeks out because of COVID or whatever the case may be, penalty free. And of course, the supply chain has been willing to provide that all the way through the process. Not so in 2022 and not so in 2023, because supply is going to outstrip, demand is going to outstrip supply very, very quickly. It's going to turn into a seller's market very, very quickly, because you have cancelled, postponed groups from 21, the programs that are able to go ahead in 2022 on top of that. And so 2022 is looking busy already, a lot, and you also have a reduction in capacity. Some hotels across Europe, across the world have closed. So, New York has, I think, about 60% of the hotel rooms that it had pre-COVID. So there's a constriction in demand there. And what's going to happen is that, the corporate clients, the buyer chain are going to be demanding this flexibility that they've enjoyed and that they've got used to, but the supply chain is not going to be able to offer that. It's going to be because we're so busy. So that's going to be an interesting one for, I would say, the Q2 onwards from 2022.
Yeah, very good point. And we're going to open the conversation up to the floor just now. So please, if you've got questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A or whatever. And I think actually that's the end of the slides that we want to share. There are quite a few more slides to come. Right. So yeah, there is a little bit more meat to those slides, and there's some other. So I highly recommend that when we do send out the link, you have a look at that. So we've eaten up 40 minutes already on this presentation, and Hugh, thank you so much for talking through it. Certainly didn't seem like 40 minutes. It's gone very quickly. But yeah, we'd like to open it up to the floor. There were some questions that came through, and while you guys are thinking about, let's just see, there's something in the Q&A from Tess. What is the general feeling with the spikes and new restrictions in Europe? Hugh, could you answer that?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the last week or two, we're seeing, new developments again. I mean, numbers in the UK are rising all the time. I think Austria put a lockdown on unvaccinated people yesterday. Anybody who is unvaccinated is now on the lockdown. The Netherlands went into a partial lockdown towards the end of last week. We're in European winter. The health sectors are under strain and stress. And I think what I was speaking about a minute ago, I think what we all expected was, that there would be an opening of the floodgates and we would be good to go and everything would be back to normal. I think what we can look at is starts and stops in different parts of the world as we go through this, as we navigate. I cannot see full lockdowns happening in either the major markets or in Europe again. It's just too damaging to the economy. As the vaccination rates are now up there, it's a case of how we live with it. What will happen is that the restrictions will go up and down. There will be, as we go into different territories and different parts of the world, depending on their current status and things changing. So what you have now is you have a moving target, if for want of a better word, all the time. Things are changing. So how does that translate into what we're dealing with? So that most probably means that keeping clients and buyers up to date with the latest of what's happening in a destination and how does it affect you. The flexibility in contracting around that, because what happens if, and making sure that you're covered if those things. So we could see potentially more postponements or moving a couple of weeks later until the dip has come down again. But also the moving to a space where it's I've lost my train of thought now when I was talking about but it's just a moving target. That's what I was going to say is just being closer to on the ground. So understanding, and I think what we will see is if a destination is good to go to and the timing is right, and you remember that slide that talked about access, then I think we will see shorter leading times, because I think it'll be right. We can do something in a specific destination. The conditions are good. Let's do it and let's make it happen. So I think, to sum up, the feeling is that be prepared for a lot of flexibility next year, a lot of quick changes, a lot of quick decisions, a lot of short lead times, because something needs to happen, and that destination potentially that we had on the radar, we can't go there anymore. So maybe we need to change our plans quickly and do something different.
I mean, a practical example, and you mentioned Maldives earlier, they did a sterling job of taking full advantage of, come to us, just bring your PCR test and come and enjoy, versus a Mauritius destination that was all cagey and super, nanny-ish about the way they operated, have lost a lot of business as a destination. So there's a real play out of those kind of things happening. South Africa, I think, can always get its act together much more from a government and the various tourism boards to help make our destinations safer. Obviously, campaigning for more and more vaccines and getting our general population vaccine is a critical factor that planners will look at. So we really have to support that drive. But we also have to do some smart things around making it safe and a destination that's appealing as well in that space. So I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, but we did have some when you registered. There was some nice questions from Kenny Bolga. I think we've answered 1 and 2, but one of the questions are what are the key changes as far as companies go to the way they are looking to reward their employees, clients? So, I think I'll take that one, Hugh, there was a big swing to alternative rewards during COVID. We as a company have both aspects in our business arsenal. So that's one of the reasons why we remained profitable during COVID, is that we were able to swing travel budgets into our non-travel reward section. I'm hoping that business will still stay and travel will pick up, which will be great. And I think there is that opportunity. But I think another factor that has really hit home to companies is with this working from home remote stuff, culture and how you keep a culture of togetherness in a business has really become front and center. Instead of having people drift off into their own spaces and do their own thing, which is all great if the product, but how do you keep a company culture together? So I think there's more and more opportunity. I see the incentive overall global and local market growing rather than shrinking. Hugh, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there was a swing away from it, but I think what's refreshing to see is, again, going back to that research that Psych did, is that, there's full confidence from the C-suite. There's no doubt that travel incentives work, and we're not going to move about. I do think there is a challenge. I think there's a challenge that we really need to think about that the industry is going to face in the next year or two. And I think COVID has just pushed it to the side a little bit, but that's sustainability. I think the industry is going to have a bigger challenge in terms of how do you justify taking 200 people on an airplane to the other side of the world for a jolly from a sustainability point of view? And how do you offset that and make sure that you not appear to be greenwashing that? And at the moment, it's gone a little bit into the background because COVID has come to the fore, but that is going to come back. And that's a big challenge that the industry is going to have to face and deal with in terms of how we handle that and how we deal with that sustainability question. So that's an interesting one. But for the moment, I mean, the desire, everybody uses it, the pent-up demand is there. There is no doubt.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the sustainability thing. That's something I'm passionate about as well. I did the calculation on my flight via London to Las Vegas. Would have been 10.9 tons of carbon emission. One flight, one person. Now, in the light of COP26, all that's going on with the climate change crisis, though, as you say, that's going to become a monster. That's the elephant in the room. Corporates, I think, are going to be paying a lot more attention to that and those numbers as we go forward. That could be a wonderful opportunity for regional destinations. And it could also be a huge risk if you're only hunting in the international markets and long-haul destination, which South Africa is. So keep an eye on that one. Monica Ackerman posted a question. What will the limitations/regulations around incentive travel be for 2022, specifically international travel? I think we've touched on that, Hugh. Any thoughts?
I mean, the question is really who knows? It will depend. It will be destination specific. Every destination will have different requirements, and that will be the challenge for us, I think, in the industry, and especially for you guys that are planning stuff, staying on top of those restrictions and understanding it, because understanding who's open, who's closed, what the restrictions are. And what we're finding is the DMCs are being brought into the sales process a lot earlier. So what's happening is that a lot of our meeting plans, incentive houses are saying to them, can we have a quick conversation with the DMC so they're almost on speed dial when it comes to presenting to clients and saying, okay, well, at the moment, this is the way that we're handling it. This is how the airport works. These are the requirements to get in. It could change. If it does change, then it'll have the following impacts on you. But you can still do the program. You'll just have to do it slightly differently or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, very difficult question to answer. My response would be is that I think we have another 18 months of really challenging time in terms of moving targets as we get fourth waves. Who knows about another variant and where this is going. So yeah, we're not out of the woods yet, folks.
For sure. Okay, we're definitely going to close this webinar on the top of the hour. So we've got 9 minutes left. Please, if there's anybody that would like to pose a question outside of that, we've got Carla or so was asking a question about where the rest of the world is in terms of corporate as well as leisure groups. Hugh, do you want to just touch on leisure very quickly?
So the MICE industry is traditionally, the first to suffer, the last to recover. We were traditionally the leisure market leads the way in terms of recovery. So that's why, especially in the UK, we were watching the UK summer season very, very closely because we wanted the low-cost airlines to start traveling again and, things to start opening up, which didn't quite happen. But it's amazing. On the day that the announcement that the US was opening up, it went mad. It went crazy. I mean, you're talking about a 6,000% increase in the number of hits on the British Airways website. So, wow. I mean, just the pent-up demand is huge. We're talking about £4,000 for an economy class fare to New York. And they were full. The flights are booked. So people are traveling. There is no doubt that people are traveling. Clients are traveling. We have groups traveling next month. And leisure market is happening. People are going to destinations all over. So it's interesting, especially in Europe. I would say that there is a regional slant on things still. People are not going too far afield. If they can hop on a train or hop in a car as opposed to getting on a plane, they'll do that first. We're even seeing that with sort of corporate groups looking to travel, Germany going to Switzerland or going to Austria nearby. So I think we'll still see an element of that regionality happening. But yeah, it's quite surprising how quickly people have bounced back. I mean, one of the news articles today was moaning about the queues at Heathrow again, the standing people coming back into business.
Another question. I mean, you run an organization of an association of DMCs around the world. I know you spend a lot of time with those members of yours talking about how we reshape a program and for a post-COVID sort of environment. Iris Himmel wanted to know, what will future products look like? What do you think, if any, changes the delivered product on the ground will look like?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk about that. There was a lot of talk about destinations like Norway and, Switzerland going up into the mountains where there's a lot of space, or, Namibia, South Africa, an outdoor destination so that we're not all crammed in the same room. Yes, I think there is an element of that. I think realistically programs will be looking to have that space around them, I would say. So definitely incorporating that more into the itineraries. I wouldn't say it's a game changer, but I think that will appeal more to incentive buyers, planners that are looking at programs. But to be honest, Dave, I think the fundamentals are still there. People want to go out. They want to go out to a nightclub, where it's going to be busy and where it's going to be packed. You don't want to go and sit on a beach by yourself. You know, the whole idea of incentive travel is traveling with people and going with people. So I think the fundamentals are still there. I think we might see more open air dining. We might see more activities that are open. But if the fundamentals of a destination are there, you know, if you're going up the Eiffel Tower, you're going up the Eiffel Tower. You might just be longer. Might just take you longer. And again, those same trends that we saw pre-COVID, that freedom of choice. So freedom of choice and excursions, and do I rather go to the spa or go on a shopping trip? And offering those, making sure that people feel comfortable in the environment instead of forcing them onto a bus every day.
Yeah, for sure. And then one final one from Bruno Neto. He kind of was saying, where will the speakers get their presentation or the case studies from? Where do we make our case studies? So Bruno, just to give Cite a punt again, Cite, an incredible organization that's delivered this research. I think it's tremendously encouraging. It's factual. It speaks to the actual users of incentives and not the intermediaries. So I really hope that you enjoy going deeper into the research at the personal level, and certainly if anybody wants to connect, ask any further questions, myself or Hugh are available. Just drop us a direct message on our LinkedIn contacts. And I think that's a good place to land this webinar. Hugh, thank you so much for your participation. Thoroughly enjoyed your input today, and as always, love working with you, my friend. And
thanks so much for me. Great to see everyone again. You know, it's been a horrific 2 years. It really has. You know, from an industry perspective, but definitely optimism out there. Keep the faith. You know, things are getting better. Maybe not as quickly or as fast as we would have liked them to happen, but they're, you know, people want to travel again. People want to experience this, and corporate clients are desperate to get back into the mix again. It was, you know, it's amazing how quickly we all want to revert back to the same old ways. So it's all good.
Yeah, and you know, that an image of that person crawling through the desert and getting closer and closer to the water and the oasis, and you don't know whether it's a mirage you're seeing or it's actual water that you can quench yourself with. And I really, I've spoken to so many people in our industry that have suffered tremendously. And well done for each and every one of your courage to get to this point. We might not be at the finish line or even at the start line yet, but keep going. As Hugh said, keep the faith. And if you need support, you know, just an encouraging word or a pat on the back or a coffee, please reach out to Hugh and myself, and we're here to support and be the leaders that we've always been in this industry. And yeah, so thank you for your participation. The names on this list are significant names in the South African industry. Thank you all for being on and making time. And you are what's going to make the South African and Adeshola from Nigeria, the African continent is going to rise in terms of the business tourism sector, and you are the ones that are going to make it happen. So fantastic being industry colleagues with you all. Thanks for participating and all the very best.
Thanks, Dave. See you soon.
Okay, good. I'm going to end it now. Thanks, guys.